I arrived a little early, not because I had to, but because that's just how I raised him. On time, respectful, present. I stood near the entrance of the venue, straightening the collar of my worn-out coat, watching guests in suits and silk dresses glide past me. I recognized no one, but I smiled anyway, the kind of smile you wear when you're proud, but tired. The kind only a father wears, one who's walked the road alone. When I finally walked inside, I scanned the banquet hall, chandeliers gleaming, violins humming faintly in the air, laughter echoing from corners of white linen tables. Then I saw my seat, front row, table 2, close to the stage. For a moment, I felt honored until I saw what was taped on the chair in bold, cruel letters. Low educated, just a so-called father. I froze. No one looked surprised, not the bride's side, not her family, not even the man in the tux fixing his tie, as he chuckled. One of her uncles nudged another and said under his breath, "At least he showed up, brave of him." The bride's mother laughed out loud, as if I were a joke being passed around. That's when it hit me. I wasn't a guest. I was the entertainment. I didn't say a word, just quietly reached for my coat and stood up to leave, every eye burning holes in my back. Then, as I turned, I felt a hand gently wrap around mine. I looked down. It was my son. He didn't say much, just looked at me the way he did when he was little, when he'd get scared at night and reach for my hand without a word. And softly he said, "Dad, this isn't your place anymore. Let's go home. My name is Walter Jennings. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever built someone's entire world, only to find out you were never meant to live in it?" We didn't speak on the way home, just the steady rhythm of the turn signal, the occasional sigh from the heater, and the silence of two men, one older, betrayed, the other, ashamed. I stared out the window as the wedding venue disappeared behind us. The tuxedos, the flowers, the champagne towers, all of it fading in the rear view. He pulled into my driveway and parked. Then just sat there, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping him together. "I didn't know," he finally said, voice cracking. "Dad, I swear to you, I didn't know they'd do that." I didn't answer right away. What do you even say to that? Instead, I opened the door and stepped out into the cold evening air. He followed me in. For the first time in years, my son stood in the living room he once called home, the same room where I had fed him canned soup during the recession, where I taught him how to tie his shoes, where his baby pictures still hung untouched. He looked around and said, "You haven't changed anything." "No," I replied, "because nothing here ever needed proving." He sank into the old couch, head in his hands. I sat across from him. "Do you know how many jobs I worked just to get you through college?" I said quietly. 3. 2 during the day, 1 overnight. I'd sleep in the truck sometimes, eat from vending machines, just so you could walk that graduation stage with your head high. He looked up, tears forming. "I remember." "Then why didn't they?" Silence again. Heavy. Choking. He took a deep breath. "When I met her family, I thought they were everything I wasn't. Polished. Educated. Rich. I guess. I let them shame the parts of me that came from you." He was crying now, but I wasn't. I'd already shed my tears over the years. "You're not weak, son," I said. "But you let them rewrite your story, and they erased the man who wrote the first chapter." That night, he stayed over, fell asleep on the same couch where we used to read bedtime stories. The next morning, my phone buzzed. 29 missed calls. All from the bride. Part 3. I didn't call her back. Not after the 4th call. Not after the 10th. Not even after the 29th. I just stared at the phone as it lit up over and over on the table, like it was begging for attention, for forgiveness, for explanation. I made eggs that morning, the same way I used to when my son was a boy, over medium, little bit of cheese, black pepper on top. He sat across from me like a child again, quiet and unsure. "She kept asking me why you weren't dancing," he said finally. I looked up from my plate. She said, "Why is he just sitting there like a ghost?" And I said, "Because that ghost built my whole life." She didn't laugh, just rolled her eyes. I nodded slowly. "She doesn't understand hard hands," I said. She doesn't know what it's like to bleed for someone else's future. He looked down, ashamed. That's when the knocking started. Rapid, urgent. Like whoever it was had been pacing outside for hours. He stood up. I'll get it. I didn't stop him. He opened the door, and there she was. The bride. Still in part of her wedding dress. Mascara streaked. Hair undone. Face pale like she hadn't slept. I need to speak to him, she said. No, Dad. No, Mr. Grayson. Just cold, flat urgency. My son stepped aside, unsure. She walked in like a storm disguised in lace. But I didn't move. Why didn't you answer my calls? She asked. I looked at her. Calm. Measured. Decades of silence behind my eyes. She continued. They weren't supposed to put that on your seat. It was a joke. No, I interrupted. It was a message. She froze. You wanted me erased from the story. That plaque on my chair? It wasn't a mistake. It was a spotlight. She opened her mouth, but no words came. I stood, slowly, every joint in my body remembering the weight of sacrifice. Let me show you something, I said. And I walked to the garage. Because the next part of my life had been waiting in the dark for years. The garage smelled like dust and old victories. She hesitated at the doorway, still clutching part of her torn wedding veil like it might shield her from the truth. My son stood behind her, silent, unsure, caught between blood and bond. I flicked the light switch, and there it was. An old corkboard hung on the far wall, cluttered with newspaper clippings, certificates, photographs, all covered in fingerprints and time. What's this? She asked, her voice brittle. I walked over and tapped the center photo. A young boy missing his 2 front teeth, holding a science trophy. Me standing behind him, still in my plumbing uniform, still proud. My son's first state championship, I said. He forgot his speech. So I wrote one in the truck, on the back of a napkin. He won anyway. I moved my hand to the next, a dog-eared acceptance letter to Columbia. He couldn't afford housing. So I sold my pickup, rode the bus to fix toilets 3 counties away. But he went. She blinked. Then I pointed to the folder below it, sealed with a rusted clip. I started a trust fund for him. It wasn't much. But every job, I put $50 aside. For his wedding. For his future. She glanced at my son, who was now staring at the floor like it had answers. You think because I didn't wear a suit, because I didn't know the difference between red wine and Merlot, that I wasn't a father? I stepped closer. I was the man who stayed. I was the man who never let go, not even when it would have been easier to walk away. She swallowed hard. For the first time, the arrogance in her spine bent. I'm sorry, she whispered. But I shook my head. You're not ready for sorry. Not until you understand what it costs to build someone else's dream while burying your own. Then I turned to my son. You asked me once why I never brought anyone home. Why I never remarried. This, I said, gesturing between them, is why. The silence was heavier than the garage door behind them. And when I walked past them toward the morning light outside, neither one moved. They just watched me, like they'd seen a ghost come back to life. The door closed behind me with a soft click. No slamming, no yelling, just finality. I didn't drive home that day, I walked. 3 miles under the July sun. I needed the heat, the ache, the silence. At the corner store, the old clerk looked up and said, Wedding go well, Walter. I gave a small smile. They served shrimp I couldn't pronounce. So yeah. He chuckled unaware. But I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. Something inside me had settled, like a storm that knew it had passed. That evening, I sat on my porch with a cup of lukewarm coffee. And that's when it started. Buzz, buzz, buzz. 29 missed calls. All from the bride. No texts. No explanations. Just desperation. My voicemail was full by 8 p.m. By midnight, she was calling from block numbers. And by sunrise, she had switched to sending voice notes, each one shakier than the last. Finally, one came from my son. Dad, it's bad. I need to see you. No apology. No ownership. Just need. Typical. I didn't answer. Instead, I stood up, walked to the drawer where I kept all the things that reminded me I was still a man, and pulled out a simple envelope. Inside, a lease. 6 months ago, I had signed it quietly. A small cabin outside town. Wood-burning stove. No neighbors. No noise. I had known this day would come. Not this exact scene, but this feeling. This moment when silence speaks louder than legacy. Before leaving, I turned back once. The porch swing I built with my hands creaked in the breeze. The dent in the railing from when my son crashed his bike at 12 still caught the light. I closed the door gently. Didn't lock it. Didn't need to. Some homes are meant to hold memories, not men. And sometimes the only way to be heard is to disappear just enough to make them miss your voice. The cabin was quiet, the kind of quiet you don't notice at first until your heart starts beating slower to match it. I arrived before sunrise. No one knew where I was. That was the point. It was tucked near a pine forest, with a chipped blue door and a porch that faced the morning light. I made coffee on a rusted stovetop, poured it into a tin cup, and sat outside, alone, but not lonely. That morning, my phone stayed silent. But by noon, they found the silence unbearable. I turned it on just to watch it ring. 6 new calls, 3 voicemails, and 1 video message. I watched it on mute first. Just their faces, panicked, confused, shaken. Then I turned on the sound. The bride's voice cracked through the speaker. "Mr. Grayson, please. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know they'd put that nameplate on your seat. It wasn't me. I just wanted a perfect day. And now everything's falling apart." Behind her, I saw my son pacing, clutching his head. I paused the video. A perfect day. That's all they ever cared about. How things looked. They wanted a father who fit into a photo album. Not one who knew how to fix leaky pipes, or make dinner stretch on an empty fridge, or read bedtime stories with dirt-stained hands. They wanted her version of perfection. I wrote 1 text. Just 1. If you ever learn what real love looks like, come find me. Until then, keep your chairs and your titles. I hit send. Then deleted the thread. Because some moments are too sacred to revisit. That evening, I walked through the woods behind the cabin. The trees didn't care who I was. The wind didn't judge my grammar. And the stars didn't need me to be anything more than a man who looked up and felt small, in the best way. I didn't feel like a joke anymore. I felt free. They thought I'd be broken. But I wasn't. I was rebuilding. Just not the version of me they recognized. They showed up 3 days later. First, the bride. Then her parents. And finally, my son, standing behind them, eyes low like a boy again. They didn't expect the cabin. They didn't expect the silence either. Or the man they found sitting on a porch with no need to impress anyone. She stepped forward, heels crunching against gravel, clutching her purse like a shield. "Mr. Grayson," she began, voice soft, we've been trying to reach you." I didn't respond. Her mother cut in, all gloss and desperation. "There's been a misunderstanding. You have to know, we didn't mean to insult you. It was the decorators. A bad joke. A bad joke. That's what I was to them." Then my son spoke. "Dad." I messed up. His voice trembled. For once, no titles. No Mr. So-and-so. Just Dad, raw and unpolished. I was scared they wouldn't accept me if I stood up for you. I thought maybe it would pass. That you'd let it slide. I stood up. Slowly. Deliberately. Not out of rage, but with the weight of 1,000 forgotten moments. I walked past his in-laws. Past the bride. Until I stood in front of my son. "You know what hurts?" I said, barely above a whisper. "It's not the laughter. Not the plaque. It's that you saw it and sat down anyway." He blinked, tears gathering. "You let them make me feel like less. In a room I should have never had to earn a seat in." "I know," he choked. "I know. But knowing changes nothing, unless it's followed by choice." I looked at the bride. "You didn't write the words. But you let them stay." "I was overwhelmed," she said. "It all moved too fast." "No," I said. "You just moved too far from your own heart." Then I turned to leave. "You're not coming back?" my son asked. "Not to be tolerated," I replied. only where I'm treasured. As I stepped back inside, the air shifted. Not because of what I said, but because, for the first time, I meant it. I didn't return to the city. Not for the apology dinner they tried to organize. Not for the clarification post the bride's family posted online. Not even when they sent gifts labeled to the best father-in-law we could ask for. I had no room left for decorations. Not the kind made of words. But something did come back to me, slowly. Respect. It started when an old client of mine, a retired plumber I'd helped decades ago, shared my story on a local blog. He called it, "The Man Who Built Without Blueprints." By morning, it had spread. Strangers wrote letters. Young men showed up to my porch just to talk. Not about revenge, but about repairing. They asked, "How did you stay so calm? How did you leave without breaking down?" I told them the truth. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's survival. 2 weeks later, I received a notice from my son's company. Apparently, there had been a change of leadership. The bride's father, once hailed as a visionary, had stepped down amid an internal review. Turns out, the plaque at the wedding wasn't just a petty joke. It reflected a pattern. A way he labeled others he deemed less than. Someone had submitted documentation, email trails, meetings, audio clips, all anonymously. But I knew. Not because I needed to, but because sometimes life hands back what it once stole, but only after you stop chasing it. One rainy evening, my son came back. Alone this time. He didn't knock. Just sat on the porch beside me. We didn't speak for a long time. Just the sound of rain on wood. 2 generations, letting silence be the apology. Finally, he whispered, "You didn't deserve any of it." I nodded, then looked him in the eye and said, "Make sure no one else gets a seat with my name if they can't speak it with pride." He wiped his eyes, and for the first time called me something he hadn't since he was 10. Dad. And that was enough.